The ladder beyond the stars. I found it on a night without time, when clocks stood still and even the moon seemed to hold her breath. There, in the middle of a meadow I didn't remember walking into, stood a ladder. It wasn't propped against anything. No tree, no wall, no scaffold of dreams. Just, standing. Reaching up into the night sky like a pencil mark against the velvet of the cosmos. A simple thing. Wooden, with faded blue-gray rungs that shimmered faintly in the starlight. I looked up, and it vanished into the heavens. Not into clouds, because there were none. Just into the vast unknown. I didn't wonder how it balanced or who had placed it there. My heart had already decided. I would climb it. The first rung felt warmer than I expected. It hummed, soft, like a lullaby remembered from childhood. I placed my second foot and pulled myself upward, gently, almost reverently. The grass below sighed as I left it behind, folding itself back into silence. Each step up revealed a softer world. Sounds from the meadow dulled. Even the breeze that had whispered across my face stilled as if respecting the journey. The stars above twinkled, not as distant lights, but as invitations. I didn't look down. I didn't feel the need to. The first thing I passed was a cloud that didn't belong to any weather pattern. It was shaped like a curled-up cat, purring as I brushed by. It drifted around the ladder, circling me once before continuing upward as if it too were climbing. Higher still, I passed a ribbon of air that shimmered with colors I couldn't name. I reached out, and it curled around my wrist like a bracelet. It tickled but never held me back. A gift, perhaps. The stars grew larger. Not threatening, no, never that. They were just, closer. And kinder. Some had freckles. One wore a small hat. At one point, I reached a rung that glowed gently as I touched it. The warmth spread through my fingers and into my chest, a quiet calm that slowed my breath. I paused there for a while, unsure how much time passed. But time, as I discovered, wasn't invited on this journey. The ladder creaked in a soothing rhythm with each step. It wasn't old, it was timeless. Each creak was like a breath, a reminder that even this climb was part of something alive. Above me, the sky had deepened. It was no longer dark but velvet purple, thick with stars. Some swam lazily like fish in a tranquil sea. Others flickered like fireflies, blinking just long enough for me to smile at them. I reached a platform, a rest spot perhaps. A tiny wooden circle with a bench carved from moonlight and dew. I sat, legs dangling into the sky below, and listened. There was no sound, yet I felt surrounded by quiet conversation. The stars hummed in harmony. The air brushed against my cheek with a tenderness that said, "You are not alone." Looking around, I noticed other ladders far off in the distance. Hundreds of them. Thousands. All going up. All holding a single climber, each moving slowly, peacefully, in their own rhythm. It didn't feel lonely. It felt shared. Like each of us was on a gentle path to something, not chasing but arriving, one breath at a time. When I stood again, the platform gently rocked, as if saying goodbye. I placed my foot back on the rung, which no longer seemed like wood but something softer, like memory made solid. I kept climbing. One star drifted close and hovered beside me. It pulsed softly, casting waves of silvery blue over my skin. I reached out, and it brushed my fingertips before continuing upward, always upward. There were no questions. No answers. Only the quiet certainty that this ladder had always waited for me, and I had always been meant to climb it. With each rung, I felt lighter. Not because gravity changed, but because something within me did. Thoughts became softer. Memories more fluid. Worries thinned until they dissolved into the air. Eventually, the space around me became a wash of twilight. Not quite night, not quite dawn. The kind of in-between that only dreams know well. The stars now glowed behind gauzy veils, and the ladder glided through it like a gentle river. I lost track of how many steps I had taken. I no longer counted. I no longer needed to. Ahead, the ladder curved slightly, not left or right, but inward, towards something warm. I climbed slowly now, not from exhaustion but from peace. The kind of peace that moves at its own pace, like petals falling in slow motion. I paused again, resting my chin on the next rung. The view was endless. Below me, the world had become a soft haze. Above me, the unknown welcomed me like a gentle tide. And so I breathed. And so I waited. And so I continued. Chapter 2, The Stairway of Whispering Stars. The higher I climbed, the quieter everything became, not silent, exactly, but steeped in a kind of hush that felt deeper than stillness. It was as if the air itself was listening, or perhaps remembering. With every step, the world behind me faded further into something soft and unspoken. The stars here didn't shine like those near the ground. They murmured. Whispers fluttered around me, delicate as silk threads carried on the wind. At first, I thought it was just in my head, a faint echo of forgotten dreams. But the longer I listened, the more I realized they were speaking to me. Not with words, but with gentle impressions that curled inside my chest like lullabies made of light. One star drifted so close that I could see its surface, textured like paper folded many times, glowing softly from within. As I climbed past it, I felt a memory stir. Not mine. Someone else's. A quiet afternoon in a field of white flowers. The smell of warm bread. A voice humming a tune too old to name. It was beautiful, and it vanished the moment I smiled. Other stars followed. Each one whispered something different as I moved by, and each time, a fragment of emotion would rise gently from within me. Not sadness, not joy, just presence. A sense of being exactly where I was meant to be. Some of the rungs began to change in color. One would glow a soft lavender, another a shade of seafoam green. They didn't seem to be arranged in any pattern, yet stepping on them created small chimes that rang through the air like ripples on water. It felt less like I was climbing now and more like I was playing a melody that only the sky understood. And the ladder responded. It didn't bend, didn't shift, but I could sense that it was listening to me too. Every footstep, every breath, was part of a slow and tender song being written in real time. I wasn't just moving, I was part of something being composed. Eventually, I reached a place where the stars grew dense, like snowflakes gathering mid-fall, suspended in a quiet storm. They circled the ladder without touching it, keeping a respectful distance as if they were guardians of this part of the journey. Their whispers grew more distinct, not louder, but more focused. I could feel their meanings brush against the edge of my thoughts like someone trying to wake me gently. They spoke of old things, of beginnings. One of them sang to me. It wasn't a song in the way you'd hear with ears. It filled me like warmth in my chest, blooming slow and wide. The sound painted pictures behind my eyelids, images of stairways woven from moonlight, of forests grown in the craters of planets, of oceans made entirely of feathers and breath. I climbed with a smile on my lips, though I hadn't realized it was there. The ladder passed through a curtain of mist that shimmered like glass dipped in starlight. As I stepped through, I felt a shift, not a change in gravity, not a tilt in balance, but something subtler. My heartbeat slowed. My thoughts stretched, gentle and loose, as though the air itself encouraged a slower pace. And so I slowed. The rungs invited it. Each step now felt like a pause in a poem. I could have floated upward with no effort at all, but the ladder, in its wisdom, asked me to take my time. And I was glad to do so. There was no destination, not really. Only motion. Only upward. Another star drifted near, this one shaped like a bell with petals. It chimed when I passed, and I felt a memory again, not mine, but familiar. The feeling of dipping your hand into a cool stream on a summer evening. The sensation of someone braiding your hair. Laughter echoing across a quiet hill. These stars didn't remember names or faces. They remembered feelings. And they shared them freely, gently, without explanation or demand. One whisper lingered longer than the rest. It coiled around my wrist like a ribbon of air. It said, without saying, "You are not climbing alone." I looked out at the other ladders again, still scattered across the sky like threads in a vast tapestry. Each held a figure like me, moving slowly, pausing often, sometimes sitting in thought. And though they were far, impossibly far, I felt a kind of kinship with them. We were all part of something larger than our small, quiet selves. Somewhere above me, I saw something else, barely visible, like a shimmer in the dark. Another platform. A garden of light. I couldn't tell. But it called to me without urgency. It was not a goal, not a prize. Just the next place my heart would arrive at when the time felt right. I touched a rung that glowed warm beneath my hand, and I closed my eyes. For a moment, I didn't climb. I just existed. Held in the arms of the stars, listening to their whispers, becoming their song. And they, in turn, listened to the quiet within me. The whispering staircase was not a challenge. It was an embrace. And so I embraced it back. One step. One breath. One gentle rise into the tender hush of the cosmos. Chapter 3, The Garden Between Moons. There came a moment when the stars around me began to thin, not vanish, but spread themselves out like a curtain slowly parting. The ladder remained steady beneath my hands and feet, yet the atmosphere changed. Not cooler or warmer, but more open, as if I had stepped into the breath between two lines of a verse. Then, I saw them. Two moons, resting across from one another in the sky. Not orbiting, not moving, just gazing at each other across a vast and velvet space. They were not identical. One was soft and silvery, worn smooth like a stone held often in a warm palm. The other had a golden glow, a faint blush of rose blooming along its curves, like the sky at the edge of morning. Between them, suspended in the middle of the sky, floated a garden. At first, I thought it was an illusion. Flowers couldn't grow here, could they? But the longer I stared, the more real it became. Petals the size of stars stretched outward in spirals. Leaves shimmered in patterns that mimicked constellations. Vines wove themselves into shapes I couldn't name, some musical, some architectural, all elegant and alive. The ladder led directly into the heart of this floating garden, and I followed without hesitation. The moment my foot touched the platform of woven branches and glowing moss, a hush deeper than silence fell around me. Not heavy, but holy. I took a breath. The air smelled like memory. Not mine, but someone's. Perhaps everyone's. The scent of first rain, of old books opened by candlelight, of laughter caught in sunbeams. I stepped carefully among the flowers. None of them bent under my weight. It was as though the garden recognized me, not as an intruder, but as a long-awaited guest. Tiny lights blinked in the petals, some slow, some quick, mimicking the rhythm of breathing. I knelt beside one bloom, pale lavender with edges that glowed like moonlight caught in a bottle. As I reached out, it opened without fear, revealing a center of gently swirling light. Inside, I saw scenes. A child chasing fireflies in a meadow under a violet sky. A river flowing backwards, returning every drop of water to the mountains it came from. A staircase, much like mine, but made of wind and feathers. Not visions. Not hallucinations. Stories. The garden was full of them. Each plant a keeper of a tale. Each bloom a living diary, written in color and scent and softness. I wandered slowly, allowing my steps to follow where my breath wanted to go. There was no path, no map. Only the knowing that wherever I walked was the right place to walk. A tree stood at the center, its bark a gentle blue, its branches long and low like arms waiting to wrap around you. Nestled within its roots were lanterns, dimly lit and swaying without wind. I sat at its base and leaned back, letting the tree support my weight. Above, the moons gazed on. Their light mingled and painted the leaves in hues of silver gold and rose gray. Shadows moved in circular dances, but never once felt ominous. There was no fear here. No doubt. Only belonging. The tree began to hum, not audibly, but within me. Its stillness sang. A vibration of deep comfort and ageless wisdom. My eyelids grew heavy, not from tiredness, but from the gravity of peace. Time, if it had ever existed here, was now entirely absent. I could have stayed in that garden forever and never wondered if a moment had passed. A petal floated down and landed in my lap. It was warm and soft as velvet, and when I touched it, it dissolved into a small whisper of air. Keep going. I looked back toward the ladder. It rose once more from the far edge of the garden, its rungs now threaded with ivy that shimmered like stardust. It hadn't waited, because it knew I would return in my own time. Standing once again, I bowed slightly to the tree, to the flowers, to the two moons above. They did not bow back. They didn't need to. Their stillness was acknowledgement enough. As I climbed once more, I didn't feel as if I were leaving the garden. I carried it now, its fragrance in my hair, its hush in my footsteps, its stories beneath my skin. The ladder welcomed me like a friend I hadn't seen in a while. Each rung now hummed with the same gentle rhythm as the tree's song. And as I rose beyond the twin moons, the stars returned, not whispering this time, but humming softly in harmony. The ladder swayed ever so slightly, like a lullaby swinging slow in the hands of the sky. I didn't look down. Not because I feared falling, but because everything I had seen was now within me, and everything ahead waited with open arms. One rung dot. One breath dot. One garden's memory carried upward by the wind. Chapter 4, The Chamber of Echoed Light. Upward I went, into a region where the stars became fewer, but brighter. Their light was no longer just white or gold. Some shimmered in shades of sapphire, others in soft coral, and a few flickered in hues I couldn't name. Not because they were strange, but because they seemed to exist between colors, as though they belonged to another language of sight altogether. The ladder, now tinged with a faint glow from the garden's lingering magic, led me into what looked like a chamber, not one built of stone or wood, but of radiance. It wasn't enclosed, and yet it felt like a room. The walls were made of light, soft and fluid, shifting gently as if breathing. They curved around me in wide arcs, neither confining nor vast, just enough to suggest a space that had been set aside, waiting for someone to arrive. Waiting for me. As I stepped from the last visible rung onto a suspended floor that shimmered like frozen stardust, I felt something stir in the air. Not wind, not touch, an echo. A presence. And then it happened. A sound, delicate and distant, like the first note of a forgotten melody, rippled through the chamber. It didn't come from above or below. It came from within the light itself. As it moved, the walls responded. They rippled like water struck by a single drop. I listened. I didn't try to understand it. I let it pass through me. Then another note came, slightly deeper, more rounded. And with it, a beam of light shifted color, slowly turning from silver to rose gold. The tone and the glow were connected. I knew it instantly. And then I understood, the chamber wasn't just a place. It was a song. A song made of memory. But not memories I carried. As I walked slowly across the luminous floor, the chamber responded to me. Each footstep created a soft tone, like a chime underwater. The light followed the sound, pulsing in gentle rhythm. With each tone, a ripple would reveal something in the walls. Like reflections, faint and dreamlike. I saw a pair of hands releasing a lantern into the night sky. A dancer moving slowly across a field of glass. Someone standing still in the rain, eyes closed, smiling. These weren't scenes to decipher. They were feelings in form. Emotions given light and sound. They washed over me, not to be analyzed but experienced. I felt quieter with each one. More transparent. Like I was becoming part of the chamber, rather than merely a guest inside it. At the heart of the chamber stood something unexpected, a spiral staircase, made entirely of light. It floated upward, slow and calm, inviting me not just to climb, but to listen. With each step, a sound played beneath my foot. A bell, a soft violin, a drop of water. No two steps the same. The air around the staircase pulsed with every note, as if the music were shaping the very space around me. And as I ascended, I realized that the music was being written in real time, from my movements, my breath, my presence. I was part of the composition. Midway up the staircase, I paused. The chamber around me expanded subtly, stretching wider. More echoes surfaced, these quieter, deeper, like heartbeats slowed. I closed my eyes and let them wash over me. Each one felt like a hand resting gently on my shoulder. No weight, just comfort. I stayed there, eyes closed, listening to the murmured song of the chamber. I heard no voices. And yet I understood. The chamber was a collector of echoes, echoes left behind by all who had passed through. Not words, not stories, but the lingering essence of feeling. Of reverence. Of release. The ladder I was climbing, it wasn't just a path. It was a gathering of soft goodbyes, gentle hopes, quiet wishes. I opened my eyes again. The staircase led higher still, where the chamber narrowed into a tunnel of light. I stepped forward and the tones faded behind me, not abruptly, but like a candle slowly going out in a room already filled with dawn. The tunnel felt different. Not heavier, but closer. The walls, though still made of light, now shimmered with more structure, like crystal dust frozen in place. They reflected not visions, but faint outlines of myself. Not like a mirror, there was no accuracy. Just suggestions. My posture at a younger age. my hand holding something I no longer recognized. A laugh I didn't remember laughing. But I smiled at them anyway. They weren't about remembering. They were about recognizing what had been, without needing to bring it forward. Eventually, the tunnel opened once again, and I found myself back on the ladder. It had reappeared with no fanfare, its wooden rungs familiar, its gentle glow unchanged. A friend waiting patiently. I stepped onto it with gratitude. And as I climbed, the chamber receded below me. Not lost. Not left behind. Just quieter now, having shared what it came to offer. The light above was softer. Not dimmer, but warmer. Like twilight melting into velvet. The stars began to return, spaced wider now, as though giving me more room to think, or to not think at all. My breath had slowed without me realizing it. My limbs moved in rhythm with the ladder's quiet song. And above me, I could sense the shape of another world waiting, one I had not seen, but already trusted. I climbed toward it not because I sought answers, but because each step made me feel more like myself. One rung. One breath. One note of light echoing outward into the hush of forever. Chapter 5, The Window at the Edge of Time. I couldn't say how long I had been climbing. Time had long since stopped behaving like something to be measured. It had stretched and curled and folded until it became more like mist, present, but ungraspable. And yet, I knew I was nearing something. The stars now appeared in smaller numbers, each one vast in its stillness. They no longer twinkled. They simply existed, like ancient listeners floating in an ocean of quiet. The ladder ascended toward a pale glow. It was not the light of a sun or star, but something softer, more personal, like the memory of morning pressed between pages of a dream. The closer I came, the more I could see it wasn't light at all, but a shape. A frame. It was a window. Suspended alone in the sky, unconnected to any structure or wall, the window stood open, its four edges gently carved from what looked like moonstone. It had no glass, no curtain, no latch. Just an opening, as if the sky itself had parted to make space for it. The ladder curved toward it, not stopping but slowing, inviting me to step off. And I did. I stood before it, and without stepping through, I looked. What I saw wasn't a landscape, nor a memory. It wasn't anything I'd ever known. And yet, it was familiar. Through that window, time unfolded. Not as a river or a clock or a spiral, but as light. Layers upon layers of soft movement. Entire lifetimes drifting like feathers on air currents. They shimmered, then dissolved. Some drifted close, then turned away. Others brushed the edge of the window and whispered something wordless before vanishing. They weren't visions of the past or future. They were possibilities. One moment, I watched a version of myself planting a garden on a floating island. Another time, I was sitting at a desk beneath a tree that sang in the wind. In one scene, I was simply watching the sky, smiling at nothing and everything. Each version felt like a thread pulled from the great weaving of what could be. Not to judge. Not to compare. Only to witness. And the more I looked, the more I understood, the window wasn't showing me options. It was showing me presence. That even in a universe with no fixed time, every moment has its own place. Its own quiet purpose. A breeze passed through the frame. It touched my face like a hand made of memory. Not sad. Not joyful. Just kind. I stepped closer, resting my hands on the edges of the frame. It was cool, smooth, and pulsing faintly. Not alive, perhaps, but aware. And as I stood there, the window began to sing. Not with sound, but with light. The scenes beyond began to flow slower, their shimmer deepening. It was as if the entire cosmos was exhaling, long and low, and the window had become the breath between. One thread drifted closer. This one was quiet, just a scene of me, older perhaps, sitting on a porch beside a still lake. I was alone, but not lonely. I held a book in my lap. The sun was neither rising nor setting, but resting somewhere in the middle. I watched that version of me turn a page. Then I watched as I looked up and smiled, not at someone, but at the sky itself. And then the image dissolved. I didn't miss it. It had never been meant to stay. It was a gentle reminder, like a whisper at the edge of a dream, you are already becoming. I closed my eyes. The window remained. I could feel it more than see it now. A pulse, soft and regular, like the beat of the universe beneath my skin. Through my feet, the ladder hummed in rhythm. A single note. Not rising, not falling. Just holding. I opened my eyes again. The space beyond the window had changed. It was now a reflection, not of what could be, but what was. My breath. My stillness. The quiet ladder behind me. The shimmer of distant stars wrapped in the arms of forever. The window no longer showed me anything. Because it no longer needed to. I stepped back, bowing my head slightly, not out of reverence, but gratitude. The kind you feel when someone reminds you of something you already knew but had forgotten to remember. The ladder waited for me once more. Its rungs now shimmered gently, as though having absorbed some of the window's song. And so, I climbed again. Not upward. Not forward. Just inward. The stars watched, no longer blinking. Their glow became gentler still. The sky softened, turning from deep indigo to a pale lavender, like the space between dusk and dawn, a place where neither begins nor ends. The ladder curved subtly now. It no longer pointed toward a destination but wrapped itself in spirals. It moved like thought. Like dream. Like the slow rotation of galaxies. I felt the rhythm in my bones. One rung. One breath. One heartbeat echoed from the window still glowing softly behind me. Chapter 6, The Top That Never Ends. The higher I went, the less the concept of up mattered. The sky no longer had a ceiling, and the stars around me no longer held still. They drifted gently, like glowing petals caught in a stream with no banks. Each one passed quietly, respectfully, as if we were travelers in the same unspoken dream. The ladder beneath me remained constant, though it had changed in its own subtle way. The rungs no longer creaked or glowed. They simply were, present, sturdy, quiet companions to each motion I made. I could no longer tell if I was nearing a destination, or if I had already arrived somewhere long ago. And yet, the climb continued. It was not a pursuit. It was not a journey forward. It was a being. A becoming. After a while, the stars began to fade, not because they dimmed, but because the light around me had changed. It was no longer the dark of space, nor the brightness of a sun, but a gentle, infinite shimmer, like walking through breath or standing inside the pause before a song begins. In this space, there was no above, no below. Just a calm, endless presence. And then, so quietly I almost didn't notice, I reached what could only be called the top. But it wasn't a peak. There was no platform, no gate, no final rung. The ladder simply softened beneath my hands and feet, like dew dissolving into mist. I looked up, and there was nothing above me anymore. Not emptiness. Not void. Just openness. A sky that no longer needed stars to be beautiful. A place where arrival was not a stopping point, but a gentle continuation. I stood in it. Not on anything, just within it. The air was tender. My breath moved like it had all the time in the world. Around me, soft glows pulsed like echoes of kindness. They were not beings, and yet they felt aware. Like the hush of someone holding a lantern in a field, waiting for you simply because they wished to wait. One light came close. It didn't speak. It didn't shine. It just floated before me, holding its stillness like a cup of warm tea held in the palms of someone who understands silence better than speech. I reached out, not to touch, but to thank. And in that moment, I realized something. The top of the ladder wasn't a place. It was a choice. A shift in how I felt my own being. There was nothing more to climb. Not because the journey had ended, but because I had become the ladder itself. Every step, every breath, every whisper from the stars and every petal from the garden had built this stillness inside me. And now, I could rest in it. Float in it. Belong in it. Not as a visitor. Not even as a traveler. But as someone who simply is. The wind here didn't move. It listened. The air didn't stir. It held. The light didn't shine. It remembered. I closed my eyes, not to shut anything out, but to feel everything more clearly. And what I felt was this. The ladder had never been reaching toward the stars. It had been reaching inward, through every layer of thought and wonder and quiet that made up who I am. It was a path back to stillness. Back to the part of me that never hurried, never feared, never doubted. The part of me that knew, without needing to be told, that peace was not something to find, but something to return to. I breathed slowly. The stars around me, those few that still lingered, began to drift in closer. Not to surround me, but to become part of the same gentle rhythm I now moved with. We were all gliding together. Not going anywhere. Not staying still. Just existing in harmony. Above, there was nothing. Below, there was everything. And I rested there, between the two, in a space that had no need for names or destinations. I don't remember letting go of the latter. But I know I did. Not with my hands, but with my heart. And as I floated, the last sound I heard wasn't a voice or a melody, but a soft pulse, a reminder that wherever I went next, I carried this stillness with me. The ladder was gone. But the climb had never been about reaching the end. It had always been about learning how to stay. One breath dot. One shimmer dot. One endless piece.